Robinson Crusoe, Chapter 16, Part 2. I had a great, high, shapeless cap made of goatskin, with a flap hanging down behind, as well to keep the sun from me as to shoot the rain off from running into my neck, nothing being so hurtful in these climates as the rain upon the flesh under the clothes. I had a short jacket of goatskin, the skirts coming down to about the middle of my thighs, and a pair of open-kneed breeches of the same. The breeches were made of the skin of an old he-goat whose hair hung down such a length on either side that, like pantaloons, it reached to the middle of my legs. Stockings and shoes I had none, but had made a pair of somethings, I scarce know what to call them, like buskins, to flap over my legs and lace on either side like spatterdashes, but of a most barbarous shape, as indeed were all the rest of my clothes. I had on a broad belt of goat skin dried, which I drew together with two thongs of the same, instead of buckles. And in a kind of a frog on either side of this, instead of a sword and a dagger, hung a little saw and a hatchet, one on one side, one on the other. I had another belt, not so broad and fastened in the same manner, which hung over my shoulder, and at the end of it, under my left arm, hung two pouches, both made of goat skin too, in one of which hung my powder, in the other my shot. At my back I carried my basket, on my shoulder my gun, and over my head a great clumsy, ugly goatskin umbrella, but which, after all, was the most necessary thing I had about me next to my gun. As for my face, the color of it was really not so mulatto-like as one might expect from a man not at all careful of it, and living within 19 degrees of the equinox. My beard I had once suffered to grow till it was about a quarter of a yard long, but as I had both scissors and razors sufficient, I had cut it pretty short, except what grew on my upper lip, which I had trimmed into a large pair of Mahometan whiskers, such as I had seen worn by some Turks whom I saw at Sallee. For the Moors did not wear such, though the Turks did. Of these mustachios or whiskers, I will not say they were long enough to hang my hat upon them, but they were of a length and shape monstrous enough, such as in England would have passed for frightful. But all this is by the by, for, as to my figure, I had so few to observe me that it was of no manner of consequence. So I say no more on that part. In this kind of figure, I went my new journey and was out 5 or 6 days. I traveled first along the seashore, directly to the place where I first brought my boat to an anchor, to get up upon the rocks. And having no boat now to take care of, I went over the land a nearer way, to the same height that I was upon before, when looking forward to the point of rocks which lay out, and which I was obliged to double with my boat, as is said above, I was surprised to see the sea, all smooth and quiet, no rippling, no motion, no current, any more there than in other places. I was at a strange loss to understand this, and resolved to spend some time in the observing of it, to see if nothing from the sets of the tide had occasioned it. But I was presently convinced how it was, viz., that the tide of ebb setting from the west and joining with the current of waters from some great river on the shore must be the occasion of this current, and that according to the wind blew more forcibly from the west or from the north, this current came near or went farther from the shore. For waiting thereabouts till evening, I went up to the rock again. And then the tide of ebb being made, I plainly saw the current again as before, only that it ran farther off, being near half a league from the shore. Whereas in my case, it set close upon the shore and hurried me and my canoe along with it, which, at another time, it would not have done. This observation convinced me that I had nothing to do but to observe the ebbing and flowing of the tide, and I might very easily bring my boat about the island again. But when I began to think of putting it in practice, I had such a terror upon my spirits at the remembrance of the danger I had been in, that I could not think of it again with any patience, But on the contrary, I took up another resolution, which was more safe, though more laborious. And this was that I would build, or rather make me another perigua or canoe, and so have one for one side of the island and one for the other. You are to understand that now I had, as I may call it, two plantations in the island. One, my little fortification or tent with the wall about it under the rock, with the cave behind me, which by this time I had enlarged into several apartments or caves, one within another. One of these, which was the driest and largest, and had a door out beyond my wall or fortification, that is to say, beyond where my wall joined to the rock, was all filled up with large earthen pots, of which I had given an account, and with 14 or 15 great baskets, which would hold 5 or 6 bushels each, where I laid up my stores of provisions, especially my corn, some on the ear, cut off short from the straw, and other rubbed out with my hand. As for my wall, made as before, with long stakes or piles, those piles grew all like trees, and were by this time grown so big and spread so very much that there was not the least appearance to anyone's view of any habitation behind them. Near this dwelling of mine, but a little further within the island and upon lower ground, lay my 2 pieces of corn ground, which I kept duly cultivated and sowed, and which duly yielded me their harvest in its season. And whenever I had occasion for more corn, I had more land adjoining, as fit as that. Besides this, I had my country seat, and I had now a tolerable plantation there also. For first, I had my little bower, as I called it, which I kept in repair. That is to say, I kept the hedge which circled it in constantly fitted up to its usual height, the latter standing always in the inside. I kept the trees, which at first were no more than my stakes, but were now grown very firm and tall. I kept them always so cut that they might spread and grow thick and wild, and make the more agreeable shade, which they did effectually to my mind. In the middle of this I had my tent always standing, being a piece of sail spread over poles, set up for that purpose, and which never wanted any repair or renewing. And under this I had made me a squab or couch, with the skins of the creatures I had killed, and with other soft things, and a blanket laid on them, such as belonged to our sea bedding, which I had saved, and a great watch coach to cover me. And here, whenever I had occasion to be absent from my chief seat, I took up my country habitation. Adjoining to this, I had my enclosures for my cattle, that is to say, my goats. And as I had taken an inconceivable deal of pains to fence and enclose this ground, so I was so uneasy to see it kept entire, lest the goats should break through, that I never left off till, with infinite labor, I had struck the outside of the hedge so full of small stakes, and so near to one another, that it was rather a pale than a hedge, and there was scarce room to put a hand through between them, which afterwards, when those stakes grew, as they all did in the next rainy season, made the enclosure strong like a wall, indeed, stronger than any wall. This will testify for me that I was not idle, and that I had spared no pains to bring to pass whatever appeared necessary for my comfortable support. For I considered the keeping up a breed of tame creatures thus at my hand would be a living magazine of flesh, milk, butter, and cheese for me as long as I lived in the place, if it were to be 40 years, and that keeping them in my reach depended entirely upon my perfecting my enclosures to such a degree that I might be sure of keeping them together, which by this method, indeed, I so effectually secured that when these little stakes began to grow, I had planted them so very thick, I was forced to pull some of them up again. In this place I also had my grapes growing, which I principally depended on for my winter stores of raisins, and which I never failed to preserve very carefully, as the best and most agreeable dainty of my whole diet. And indeed, they were not agreeable only, but physical, wholesome, nourishing, and refreshing to the last degree. As this was about halfway between my other habitation and the place where I had laid up my boat, I generally stayed and laid here in my way thither, for I used frequently to visit my boat, and I kept all things about or belonging to her in very good order. Sometimes I went out in her to divert myself, but no more hazardous voyages would I go, nor scarce ever above a stone's cast or two from the shore. I was so apprehensive of being hurried out of my knowledge again by the currents or winds or any other accident. But now I come to a new scene of my life. And we'll pause here and we'll continue with this story in the next video. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you're enjoying the book. I love you guys. As Tigger says, ta ta for now.